the Giants. They have a new coach. They had a pretty good draft. They added a top end offensive lineman, a top end pass rusher, and Thibodeau. What were your thoughts with their offseason? Does this team, with their schedule, make them a 7 or an 8-win season where they're going to surprise the league?
I look at the Giants. I just mentioned my buddy there, Bill, who passed away. He was a diehard Giants fan. He made me a better fan because he was so passionate. He was so knowledgeable. So I always knew so much about the Giants because that was his team. I look at the Giants right now and I say, this team has so much freaking talent on offense. Like, why can't we put it together? So they went out, they got Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll, the question can be said, guys, did Brian Daboll make Josh Allen? Or did Josh Allen make Brian Daboll? Now, his record as an offensive coordinator with Josh Allen, he was 34-15. Every other team that he was the offensive coordinator for, he has a record of 18-46. So it's going to be real interesting now, and he's going to get probably 3 years to see what he can do. And you're going to get 1 year at least of Daniel Jones to see if he can turn it around. I mean, Saquon Barkley, all the money you've invested into this offensive line. I like Kenny Galladay, Kadarius Toney, Wendell Robinson. You put a high draft pick onto him. Like, it's all there for Daniel Jones. That's going to be the linchpin of this team. What can Daniel Jones do? And if he can't do it, then the Giants will be in the running. You know, this is a great draft class coming up in 2023. So the Giants, you know, if they have another season where they're picking in the top 10, they've got a great opportunity for the future with a young base. I mean, I'm not looking to extend Saquon Barkley or anything, but you get the offensive line under control. Now you got, you know, the nice defensive end that you brought in this year. You're going to rework that secondary. You just got rid of Bradbury. I think things are moving in the right direction, especially in the front office for the New York Giants.
Yeah, you know, your team has James Bradbury, and they get to face the Giants twice a year. Yeah, that'll be a tough one for me to have to adjust to as a Giants fan.
Funny thing is, I had a buddy who knew his agent, Bradbury's agent, and he goes to me. And this is before Bradbury signed with the Eagles, because I always, if you're a fan of a team, you want every good free agent to sign with your team. And they were like, "Listen, this guy doesn't want to play. He's had bad turf toe." And he's got issues. He only wants to play on grass. He's only going to sign with a team that has grass. Philadelphia's a team that plays on grass. Yep. And, he only might play for another year or two, and that's it. Then he's out. Because to me, I worry about that. I'm like, oh, my God, I don't want some guy that doesn't have a passion for the game. Because you can get halfway through a season, and the guy could just be like, nah, I don't want to play. And just kind of mail it in and fake an injury or whatever happens. I mean, hopefully Philadelphia is more competitive this year, so that doesn't happen. But on bad teams, you see that stuff all the time where guys are just like, yeah, we're going to mail it in. We're going to be 4-13 this year, like Houston. So yeah, I'm going to take a few weeks off.
And this is an NFC East fan. How often do top players that become free agents sign with a rival team right away? We saw with Deshaun Jackson. We saw with DeMarco Murray. I never saw a division that does it as much as the NFC East does with that.
I'm curious if we see a inter-division trade in the NFC West with Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe to Seattle, because Jimmy Garoppolo has to go somewhere. I know there's all this talk of Trey Lance and is there arm fatigue. It doesn't matter. They spent so much draft capital to get Trey Lance. You have to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo, and you're going to this offseason. I think there is a shot they either release him and Seattle can sign him for nothing because they don't want to pay him, what he's worth. Or what he's owed, excuse me. Or, if you have to trade him and he's a stopgap kind of guy, I mean, what are you really going to give up for a Jimmy Garoppolo? A 5th, 6th round pick?
That's it.
To have him for a year? They need help out there in Seattle, unless you're just totally tanking for Bryce Young.
Look what the Panthers gave up for Baker Mayfield, a 5th round draft pick. The Jets absolutely robbed the Carolina Panthers for a 2nd and a 4th for Sam Darnold, and the guy's going to be on the scrap heap maybe by the end of this year. So, I mean, and that turned into Jermaine Johnson, who and could be a Pro Bowl, all-pro player. Anything is possible, and the crazy things happen with football, baseball, hockey. It's not even about the draft. It's how you build your team and how it makes sense to that organization and that GM on how he wants to build through it. And that's the interesting about the thing about sports. You don't have to be be the smartest guy, but you have to have a plan. And if you have the plan and you understand how the plan needs to be worked, it could work. And we've seen it happen as we see over the last couple of years, even the LA Rams. You knew what the LA Rams were going to do. The Rams had the pieces. They had the players that they believed. They needed the quarterback. Well, they traded away their future to get the quarterback. It worked. And then during the season, they made a move here, bringing in Odell Beckham. They needed a pass rusher. They bring in Von Miller. That's what they did. They traded away their future because they wanted to win now. And they needed to prove themselves after a home team like Tampa did it the year before. They wanted to do it again in LA. So it's possible, but you have to have the right base to succeed in football.
No question. It's all about, do you have a quarterback?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an offensive line? Outside of that, do you have a defensive line? Mm-hmm. Defensive lines are so underrated. Fans don't think about their O-line and their D-line. That's where you win. When you look at the teams that are traditionally terrible, why is that? You can't rush the passer. You can't influence the quarterback when he's in the pocket. That's what defensive tackles who make all this money. A guy like Fletcher Cox, who's made $1 bazillion for the Philadelphia Eagles. He doesn't have the big sack numbers. Now, like Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald's defensive tackle. He's probably one of the 5 greatest defensive linemen ever play the game. It's all about, can you disrupt the passer at the point of release? You want him moving off his set target. And if you can do that, it's going to create anxiety back there, and then it's going to give that split second for the secondary. Because let's be honest, the NFL is a passing league. Everything is set up for these offenses to win. And, the penalties are all called for them. The rules are all in their favor. Mm-hmm. So, all you want to do is, can you give your defensive backs a split second to try to make a play? And that's really what the NFL is all about now. But I'm looking up and down the standings from last year, and I was listening to what you guys were talking about with Connor before I came on. Who's going to surprise? And I was trying to think of myself, like, who's going to be a really good team, who's going to be a bad team. I couldn't agree more with that Tennessee pick as just the worst 1 seed in the history. And I'm worried about the Raiders. I think the Raiders in that division are going to have a really tough time. And this might sound controversial. I'm not in on the Bengals. I look at the Bengals and I go, okay, you were 10-7 last year. You had this fluky run through the playoffs. You've got the game where Tyreek Hill doesn't, whatever that was, at the goal line and didn't score a touchdown. Like, they don't win that game. Like, Kansas City completely handed them that AFC championship. If they would have had to play Buffalo, Buffalo would have beat them by 70 because Buffalo was flying so high. So to me, Cincinnati was a team. They improved their offensive line a little bit going into this year, but like, everyone's gunning for you. You weren't that good. You played at a really slow pace. I'm not sold on Joe Mixon and anything more than a first and second down back. They never use him on third downs. And people are going to have the book on Joe Burrow. To me, like, everyone talks about Joe Burrow like he's the next Tom Brady. I don't know. He's not. Could he be very good? To me, he's more like Matt Ryan-esque. I don't see him as Tom Brady. Like, I don't know. What do you guys think about him?
I think he's the closest thing in my eyes to Tom Brady. I kind of compared him. If you look at Tom Brady's numbers, his first 2 years, and I know Joe Burrow's got hurt last year, tore his ACL the year before that, but if you look at his numbers before that, they're very when Tom Brady stepped on the field, when the Jets knocked him out, you could look at the numbers, how Tom Brady got better and better every single year. I don't know. He's faster outside the pocket than Tom Brady, but I think he commands the huddle like Tom Brady. People respect him. Other teams respect what he could do on the field. So I don't know what Joe Burrow is, and if he can win a Super Bowl in his first 3 or 4 years, being in the league, he could shut people up and shut anybody that says that he's not as good as people think he is. But it's interesting that you say that. The team that I think is going to take steps back, like I said to Connor, is Buffalo. There's just something. Losing their offensive coordinator, a guy that really developed Josh Allen's talent for what he is today. Josh Allen doesn't have somebody to lean on anymore. He's got to take the bull by its horn. I don't know if he can. And they lost a lot of veterans defensively this year. I know they brought Von Miller. They overpaid for Von Miller. And Von Miller the last 2 seasons have not been 100% healthy. So you're paying a guy guaranteed, what, $56-60 million guaranteed, hurt your salary cap for the next offseason when there are better free agents, where you put yourself in a situation that if you're not as good as you were last year, you're taking 6 steps back instead of 2 steps back because you're becoming an older team.
And you can look at the NFL, and every year it's so cyclical, where half the teams that made the playoff one year don't make it the next year. You can just look at the AFC right now. I could make a great case for 4 or 5 teams that didn't make the playoffs last year that they could absolutely make it this year. Indianapolis, massive upgrade at quarterback, very good defense. Miami added Tyreek Hill, another year of Tua healthy. The Chargers should have been in the playoffs last year. Remember that debacle with the Raiders and
their run defense being god awful. Yes.
Yeah. So what did they
Raiders
do?
and the Texans. Remember that?
Yes. The Chargers getting blown up by the Texans.
The Texans game was horrible.
Brian, let's not forget about the biggest one. The Chargers going for it on 4th and 1 at their own 22-yard line.
That game was so awesome. I mean, God, I sat there. I think it was a Monday nighter, right? And I just sat there. I'm like, I'm gonna have to get another beer.
It was the last game of the season, like the last Sunday night game of the season.
Sunday night,
the playoffs.
So great. Yeah. But I mean, look, they go out and added Khalil Mack. They're just loaded in the secondary. Baltimore is a team always loaded on defense. I think Lamar Jackson has a resurgent year, and they're just going to go back to what they want to do, and they're going to pound the football. Denver last year was 7-10. Denver might be the most improved team in the AFC. They had Russell Wilson. That defense is still loaded. So I mean, that's just the AFC we're talking about, guys. That's where I think, looking at Cincinnati, what a hard path to try to make it back. And that division isn't great because Pittsburgh's going to be down a little bit this year. We'll see what happens with Deshaun Watson in Cleveland, but it's just a gauntlet to try to get out of the AFC versus the NFC.
And that's why.
So you're thinking maybe the 5 teams out of the Bengals, the Titans. You said the Raiders, the Steelers, and the Patriots. To think of the last one out of the playoff teams that made it last year.
Yeah, Pittsburgh, they stink. They're not going to make it. Pittsburgh's going to win 6 games this year with that quarterback situation. New England, I think New England could win their division again. I never count out
I think
New
they
England.
are winning the division this year. I don't think Buffalo's winning the division this year. I don't.
So Buffalo and New England will make it. Tennessee, no. I think Indianapolis wins that division.
I think the only team that comes out of the AFC East is the Patriots. This is something tells me this Buffalo team is not going to be the same team they were the year before. I love Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen has become a fantastic talent in this league. But when you lose a guy like Dable, who really changed your throwing motion, he really was the personality off the field for that Buffalo Bills team. It wasn't the head coach. It wasn't the defensive. It was him. Dable was the personality. And I think now that Dable's with the Giants, I think it's going to affect. It might help Daniel Jones. Who knows? But I think they're going to take steps back. And again, the Chargers, they're good on paper. So were Cleveland last year. What happened to Cleveland? I mean, come on. You just don't know when you look on paper and say, oh, that team's got some talent. You can have the most talent in the world. If it doesn't mesh and it doesn't work, it doesn't matter how much talent you have. So it's so – and I feel bad as a Jet fan because the Jets are finally getting good and they're finally doing the right thing in the draft and doing everything. But the AFC is so massively hard. Even if they win 9 or 10 games, that doesn't guarantee you a playoff spot. Even though I don't think they're going to win 9 or 10 games, I expect the Jets in a good year win 8 games this year, and then next year will be the breakout year where the Jets are going to be fun and explosive to watch. But I don't know, man. I'm scared to see what the AFC is going to be this year because it looks like on paper it's scary.
Speaking of on paper, Carl says, I can look on paper and tell you the Bears will be bad. Yes.
The Bears. Their offensive line
I feel so bad for Justin Fields, man.
Hey, he's got N'Keal Harry now.
Ooh, hey, the great receiving core of N'Keal Harry, Van Velus Jones, and Darnell Mooney. I like Darnell Mooney, though. I think he's a good player.
Do they want Jalen Rager? You can have him, too.
They want Jalen Rager.
We'll give you all the third-tier wide receivers. We'll give you Denzel Mims. Enjoy. I mean, seriously.
Yes, Jalen Rager is literally the Eagles equivalent right now.
There are some bad teams in the NFC. When you look at Washington's going to be bad. Seattle's going to be possibly the worst team in the NFC with those 2 quarterbacks. Atlanta. Nobody trusts Atlanta with Marcus Mariota or Desmond Ridder at quarterback. The Bears suck. The Giants, who knows what you get out of them. Detroit goes from 3-13-1 to
5-12.
But a team I can't wrap my head around, guys. I'd love your opinion on this. The New Orleans Saints. everybody that I listen to is like, oh, the Saints, they're a playoff team. They're a perennial Super Bowl team. And I look and I go, Jameis Winston is their quarterback. What are we talking about here?
Well, if you want crabs, you know, he could steal you a couple of those. Maybe buy you a couple.
And you know they've lost their safety in Marcus Davenport, right? Or no, not
Marcus
Williams.
Williams.
Lose
Marcus
him.
Davenport's the pass rusher.
Yes, and so you lose your great safety, and you got Jameis Williams out there. We don't know anything about Michael Thomas.
Nope.
And you've got so now you're saying, okay, Chris Olave, a rookie who gives you, he's not a physical receiver at all. He's a total finesse guy out there.
Skinny as
and
hell,
Jarvis
too.
Landry.